Welcome to another deep dive. We'll be exploring the book of Genesis today, focusing on his positive teachings and how they can guide and strengthen your faith.
Genesis really lays the foundation for so many core beliefs in Christianity. I mean, it's a book of beginnings, but it's also a book of profound wisdom that speaks to the very heart of what it means to be human, to be in relationship with God.
You probably know some of the big stories like Adam and Eve,
right?
Noah's Ark. But we're going to uncover some surprising details and deeper insights that you might have missed.
Oh, yeah.
So think of this as a chance to rediscover Genesis.
Yeah.
And find fresh inspiration for your own spiritual journey.
That's a great way to put it. We're not just going to retell the stories.
Right.
We're going to delve into their meaning.
Okay.
Explore how they can speak to your life today.
So let's unpack this, starting with the creation narrative.
Okay.
Genesis 1 paints this incredible picture of God speaking the universe into existence.
It's amazing.
And it unfolds with such order and purpose.
Yeah.
It's not just like a random explosion of stuff.
Right.
There's a beautiful structure to it.
What's fascinating here is this order reflects God's character.
Okay.
You know, light emerges from darkness, a symbol of hope and God's power to bring order out of chaos.
Okay.
The separation of waters from the land shows God establishing boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Creating a space for life to flourish.
Okay.
And the creation of the sun and moon and stars, it's not just about light.
Right.
It's about establishing time and seasons, rhythms for life.
It's like God is setting the stage for a grand symphony.
It is.
And each element playing its part in perfect harmony.
Yes.
And this order, this intentionality, speaks to God's wisdom and care for his creation.
Exactly. And when you think about it, the sense of order and purpose can be so encouraging for us in our own lives.
Right.
When things feel chaotic or overwhelming, we can remember that God is a God of order. Right.
And he has a plan, even when we can't see it.
That's a really helpful reminder, especially when we're going through tough times.
Absolutely.
Then there's that powerful statement in Genesis 1.27.
Oh, yeah.
So God created mankind in his own image.
Yes.
In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them.
Powerful words.
What does it actually mean for us to be created in the image of God?
This is where Genesis gets really personal.
Okay.
It's not just about humanity as a whole. It's about you.
Right.
You are made in the image of God.
Okay.
Which means you carry a reflection of his divine attributes within you.
So, like, I have a little piece of God in me.
You do. Think about your capacity for love, compassion, creativity, and reason.
Okay.
These are all reflections of God's character imprinted on your very being.
It's like we each carry a spark of the divine within us.
We do.
But it's more than just having these qualities.
Right.
It's about what we do with them.
You're absolutely right. Genesis 1.28 talks about humanity having dominion over creation.
Yeah. But this isn't about exploiting the earth. It's about stewardship, caring for God's creation as he would.
Okay.
It's about reflecting his love and wisdom in the way we interact with the world around us.
So being made in God's image is both an incredible privilege and a huge responsibility.
Yes.
It calls us to live lives that honor him and reflect his goodness in all we do.
Absolutely.
It's a high calling, but also an incredibly motivating one, wouldn't you say?
It's something to ponder, isn't it? How are you reflecting God's image in your life? How are you using your gifts and talents to make a positive difference in the world?
Those are great questions for each of us to consider.
They are.
Now, Genesis also introduces us to the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, the garden.
This place of beauty and abundance where God walked with Adam and Eve in perfect harmony.
That's right.
It makes you long for that kind of intimacy with God, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Yeah.
The Garden of Eden represents this ideal relationship
Right.
between God and humanity. It's a state of perfect peace and fellowship.
And those two trees in the garden, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil,
The two trees.
they represent a profound truth about our relationship with God.
They do.
The tree of life, as I understand it,
Yeah.
symbolizes that eternal life and closeness with God that we all long for.
It's a reminder that God desires to be in relationship with us.
Right.
To share his life with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
This tree represents the choice that God gave humanity.
Right. The choice.
The freedom to choose to obey him or disobey him.
It's about trusting God's wisdom and guidance or choosing to go our own way.
And we all know what happens next, right? Eve is tempted by the serpent. She eats from the forbidden tree. Adam joins her.
Yeah.
And sin enters the world.
It's the classic story of disobedience and its consequences.
But I'm curious.
Yeah.
What are some of the deeper lessons we can learn from the fall?
Well, first, it's important to remember that the fall isn't just about a piece of fruit. It's about a break in trust, a turning away from God's good design for humanity.
Right.
It's a reminder that even with all the beauty and goodness of creation, we still have the capacity to choose wrong, to go against God's will.
And those choices have consequences.
They do.
Not just for ourselves, but for the world around us, right?
Yes. Expulsion from the garden, pain in childbirth, toil and hardship.
It's like life got a lot more difficult.
Suddenly, life becomes a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
But even in the midst of judgment, there's a glimmer of hope.
Okay.
Genesis 3.15 contains what's known as the proto-evangelium.
Right.
The first promise of a redeemer who will crush the serpent's head.
I've always heard about that verse, but I've never really understood its significance.
It's a powerful prophecy pointing forward to Jesus, who will ultimately defeat sin and death. It's a reminder that even though humanity messed up, God already had a plan for redemption in place.
So even from the very beginning, even in the face of human failure, God is already working to restore what's been broken.
That's right.
That's incredibly encouraging.
It is. It shows us that God's love is relentless.
Yeah.
He never gives up on us.
Right.
Even when we turn away from him.
Right.
He's always pursuing us, always offering a path back to himself.
Speaking of turning away from God, the story of Cain and Abel, the first brothers, shows just how quickly sin can corrupt the human heart.
It can.
Jealousy, anger, violence.
The story of Cain and Abel is tragic, but it's also a powerful reminder of the destructive power of sin.
Yeah.
Shows us how quickly envy and resentment can lead to actions that we deeply regret.
And the mark of Cain, a sign of his sin and a protection from vengeance.
Right.
It's this haunting reminder of the lasting consequences of our choices.
But even in this story, we see God's mercy at work.
Okay.
He doesn't abandon Cain. He offers him protection and a chance to repent and seek forgiveness.
It's a reminder that God's grace is always available.
It is.
Even when we've made terrible mistakes.
That's right.
He's always willing to offer us a second chance, a new beginning.
That's a message that can bring us hope in the face of our own failures.
Yeah.
No matter what we've done, we can always turn to God and receive his forgiveness.
That's a beautiful thought.
It is.
Genesis then goes on to trace the development of early civilizations.
That's right.
Listing some of humanity's first advancements.
Okay.
In things like agriculture, music, metalworking.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how quickly human society begins to develop, reflecting our God-given capacity for innovation and progress.
Right, so God has given us incredible creativity and potential.
He has. We see the emergence of different skills and trades, evidence of human ingenuity, the desire to create and build.
But alongside these advancements, we also see this moral decline taking place.
Unfortunately, yes.
Culminating in Lamech's boastful song of violence.
It's a sobering reminder that human ingenuity without a moral compass can be twisted, used for destructive purposes.
So it's like a warning sign that progress without God can lead to dangerous places.
It is. We need God's guidance and wisdom to direct our creativity and our advancements towards good.
And that's just as relevant today as it was back then, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely it is.
And then, of course, comes the flood.
Yes, the flood.
One of the most well-known stories in Genesis.
It is.
This massive worldwide flood that wipes out almost all life on Earth.
It's a powerful story.
It's a pretty intense image of God's judgment on sin.
It certainly speaks to God's justice and his hatred of sin.
Yeah.
But it's also a story of God's mercy.
Okay.
And his desire to preserve life.
Right.
He chooses Noah, a righteous man who walked with God.
Okay.
And instructs him to build the ark.
Right.
A place of safety and refuge amidst the destruction.
So it's like God's offering a lifeline. A way for humanity to start over.
Exactly. The ark becomes a symbol of God's grace.
Okay.
His willingness to save humanity from the consequences of their own sin.
And after the flood recedes, God makes a covenant with Noah.
That's right.
Promising never to destroy the earth by flood again.
He does.
And that rainbow, that beautiful arc of color in the sky.
Yes.
It becomes a symbol of God's faithfulness.
It's a sign of hope and a reminder that even after judgment, God offers a new beginning.
Right. A reminder of his promise to never abandon us.
Yes.
So even in this story of destruction,
Yes.
We see God's love and mercy shining through.
Shining through.
And then we have the Tower of Babel.
Yes.
A story about human pride and ambition,
Uh-huh.
leading to the scattering of people and the confusion of languages.
The Tower of Babel is a cautionary tale about what happens when we try to reach God on our own terms.
Right.
Apart from his will.
So driven by pride and the desire for self-glory.
Yes, driven by pride.
The people sought to build a tower that reached to heaven, essentially trying to make a name for themselves apart from God.
Exactly. And God, seeing their arrogance and their misplaced ambition, intervenes.
Right.
Scattering the people and confusing their languages.
Okay.
It's a reminder that our plans, no matter how grand, will ultimately fail if they are not aligned with God's will.
So true success then comes from seeking God's guidance.
It does.
From humbly submitting to his authority and trusting in his plan for our lives.
That's a great takeaway from the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
It's a reminder to check our motives, to make sure that our ambitions are rooted in humility and a desire to honor God.
So we see humanity making mistakes.
We do.
Facing consequences.
Yes.
But God always seems to be offering a way back.
He is.
A path to restoration.
That's right.
It's a hopeful pattern.
It is. And this pattern continues in the next major section of Genesis with the call of Abram, who later becomes Abraham.
Right, Abraham.
God chooses this man and makes a covenant with him, a promise that will change the course of history.
And this is where things get really interesting, right?
They do.
I mean, Abraham's journey of faith is incredible.
It is.
He leaves his homeland, follows God's leading, and trusts in his promises, even when they seem impossible.
Abraham's story is all about faith and obedience.
Right.
He's known as the father of faith because he believed God even when it didn't make sense.
Right.
Even when the circumstances seemed impossible.
Right.
And God rewards that faith by making him the father of a great nation.
Yeah.
A people through whom he will bless all the nations of the earth.
God promises to give Abraham's descendants the land of Canaan.
He does.
A promise that will be fulfilled generations later.
That's right.
It's amazing to think about the long view that God has.
Yeah, it really is.
His ability to work through generations to bring about his purposes.
It's a reminder that we are part of a much larger story.
Right.
A story that began long before us.
Yeah.
Continues long after we are gone.
We are each a link in the chain of God's faithfulness. And our choices have ripple effects.
They do.
That extend far beyond our own lifetimes.
Absolutely.
Even when Abraham makes mistakes, like when he tells Pharaoh that Sarai is his sister.
Oh, yeah.
Out of fear for his own life.
Right.
God still protects him.
Yeah.
And works things out.
That's right.
It shows that God's love and grace are not dependent on our perfection.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
We often think that we have to be perfect to receive God's favor.
Right.
But Abraham's story shows us that God's grace is bigger than our mistakes.
Right.
He loves us unconditionally.
Yeah.
He's always working to redeem our failures and bring good out of our weaknesses.
That's so encouraging to hear.
It is.
Especially for those of us who tend to get caught up in our own imperfections.
It is encouraging.
And speaking of imperfections, the story of Hagar.
Oh, yeah.
Sarai's Egyptian maidservant.
Yes.
It's a complicated situation.
It is.
Infertility, jealousy, power dynamics, all playing a role.
It's a story that reminds us that even in the midst of difficult circumstances, even when people make mistakes, God is still present.
Yeah.
He sees the suffering of Hagar.
Right.
He hears her cries.
Yeah.
And he intervenes on her behalf.
Even though Sarai mistreats Hagar, causing her to flee into the wilderness.
That's right.
God doesn't forget her.
He doesn't.
He appears to her, comforts her,
Yeah.
and promises to bless her son, Ishmael.
It's a reminder that God's love extends to all people, regardless of their social standing or their circumstances.
Yeah.
He cares for the marginalized, the oppressed, the forgotten.
Right.
His compassion knows no bounds.
It's interesting how God chooses to work through both Sarai and Hagar.
Yes.
Even though their relationship is strained and complex.
Yeah.
It shows that God can use even our brokenness.
That's right.
Our flawed relationships to accomplish his purposes.
Absolutely. He doesn't wait for us to be perfect before he uses us.
Right.
He can take our messy lives, our mistakes and failures, and weave them into his greater plan.
That's a comforting thought.
It is.
And in the midst of all this, God reaffirms his covenant with Abram.
Yeah.
Changing his name to Abraham.
Yeah.
Which means father of many nations.
Right.
It's a symbol of the incredible blessings that will flow from his lineage.
Absolutely. And despite her old age, God promises that Sarah will bear a son, Isaac, through whom the covenant will be continued.
Wow.
It's a reminder that nothing is impossible with God.
Right.
He can work miracles even in the most unlikely circumstances.
It's a story that challenges us to trust in God's promises.
It is.
Even when they seem beyond our grasp.
Yes.
And speaking of challenges, the next story in Genesis is one of the most difficult to understand.
Oh.
The story of God asking Abraham to sacrifice his son, Isaac.
Yeah, it's a difficult story.
It's a passage that raises some tough questions.
Yeah, it does.
About God's character.
It's a story that requires careful consideration.
Right.
It's important to remember that God isn't advocating for child sacrifice.
Right.
What's being tested here is Abraham's faith, his willingness to surrender everything to God, even his most precious possession.
And Abraham, despite his anguish, is willing to obey.
Yes, he is.
He journeys to Mount Moriah with Isaac, builds an altar,
yes,
prepares to offer his son as a sacrifice.
But at the last moment, an angel of the Lord intervenes, stopping Abraham and providing a ram to be sacrificed in Isaac's place.
Wow, that's a powerful image of God's provision and his mercy.
It is.
He doesn't require us to sacrifice our children.
No.
Instead, he provides the sacrifice himself.
That's right.
It's foreshadowing of God's own sacrifice of his son, Jesus, on the cross for the sake of humanity.
It is.
It's a reminder that God's love for us is so great.
Yes.
That he was willing to give up his own son to reconcile us to himself.
It's a story that points to the very heart of the Christian faith.
It is.
And it's through Abraham's lineage that this salvation will come.
Wow.
God reaffirms his covenant with Abraham, promising to bless him abundantly, make his descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore.
So it's a promise that extends beyond Abraham and his immediate descendants.
Yes, it does.
To encompass all who believe in the God of Abraham.
Exactly. Through faith in Jesus Christ, we become heirs to the blessings of Abraham. We are grafted into his family, and we receive the promises that God made to him.
So we're seeing this incredible thread of God's faithfulness, his love, his plan for redemption woven through the generations.
That's right.
Starting with Abraham.
It's an amazing story, and we're just getting started.
And continuing through his descendants.
Absolutely.
It's an amazing story, and we're just getting started.
There's so much more to uncover, so many more lessons to learn from the lives of these patriarchs.
Yeah.
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore the lives of Isaac and Jacob. Delving into their struggles and triumphs. And discovering how God continues to work through them to fulfill his promises. It does. Picking up where we left off, Isaac and Rebekah's family journey takes some fascinating turns, Rebekah, like Sarah, before her faces infertility.
Another powerful reminder that God's timing isn't always our timing.
Yeah.
But the story echoes those themes of persistent prayer we saw with Abraham, Isaac prays, and eventually Rebekah conceives. But this is where things get really interesting.
This isn't a straightforward pregnancy.
Right.
Rebekah experiences a lot of discomfort, the baby struggling within her, and when she seeks guidance from God, she receives a truly extraordinary message. God tells her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger.
Wow, talk about a prophecy of some serious weight. Imagine being told that it's clear from the very beginning that these twins are going to have a complicated relationship, and their lives are tied to something much bigger than themselves.
It's a powerful reminder that God's plans often have a scope far beyond what we can grasp in the moment, even before these children are born. God is shaping their lives for his purposes that will have a significant impact on the course of history.
And that makes those seemingly small details of their birth even more fascinating. Esau, the firstborn, is covered in red hair, while Jacob, the secondborn, emerges grasping Esau's heel.
Their names themselves seem to hint at their destinies. Esau means hairy, a straightforward description, while Jacob means he grasps the heel, suggesting a more cunning, perhaps even deceptive nature.
It's like their very names foreshadow the kind of men they will become and the roles they'll play in God's unfolding plan.
Exactly. And as they grow up, their personalities become even more distinct. Esau, the outdoorsman, becomes a skilled hunter, while Jacob is more introspective, staying closer to home. It's a classic contrast, the man of action versus the man of contemplation.
Genesis tells us that Isaac favors Esau, while Rebekah favors Jacob. You can almost feel the tension building within the family.
This parental favoritism adds another layer of complexity to the already tense dynamic between the twins. It creates division within the family, setting the stage for some of the conflicts that will unfold later.
And one of those pivotal conflicts revolves around Jacob acquiring Esau's birthright. This is where that theme of Jacob's cunning really comes into play.
It's a story that has resonated throughout history. Esau, returning from a hunt, is famished and desperate for food. Jacob, ever the opportunist, sees his chance and demands Esau's birthright in exchange for a bowl of stew.
Imagine being so hungry that you'd trade your birthright for a meal. It seems almost unthinkable. But it speaks to the different values that Esau and Jacob placed on things. Esau focused on his immediate needs, while Jacob, even at a young age, was already thinking about the bigger picture, the long game.
It certainly makes you think about what you truly value in life. Are you driven by immediate gratification, or are you willing to make sacrifices for something greater, something more lasting?
It's a question we all have to wrestle with at some point in our lives, and this incident with the birthright isn't the end of the story. Jacob, with the help of his mother Rebekah, deceives his aging father Isaac into giving him the blessing intended for Esau.
This act of deception deepens the rift between the brothers and has far-reaching consequences. Jacob is forced to flee to his uncle Laban's house in Padan Aram to escape Esau's wrath.
It's a turning point in Jacob's life, a moment where he has to confront the consequences of his actions and begin a journey of transformation. It's interesting how God often uses those times of displacement, those moments when we're forced out of our comfort zones, to shape us and refine our character.
That's a great observation. Jacob's time with Laban is marked by both hardship and blessing. He works for 7 years to marry Laban's daughter Rachel, only to be tricked into marrying Leah, Rachel's older sister, first.
It's almost like he's getting a taste of his own medicine deception. Seems to be a recurring theme in Jacob's life.
It does, doesn't it? But these experiences, as difficult as they are shaping him, revealing his flaws, and challenging him to grow. He ends up marrying both sisters and working for Laban for a total of 14 years before finally returning to Canaan with his wives, children, and flocks.
It's a long and arduous journey filled with challenges and setbacks. And as he travels back to Canaan, the anxiety builds the fear of facing Esau. After all these years, it all comes to a head in that dramatic encounter at the Jabbok River, where Jacob wrestles with a mysterious figure throughout the night.
That wrestling match is a powerful metaphor for Jacob's inner struggle. He's wrestling with his past, with his guilt, with his fear of Esau, and ultimately he's wrestling with God.
It's a pivotal moment of transformation. He emerges from that encounter with a new name, Israel, which means he struggles with God. It signifies a change in his character, a recognition of his own weakness and his need for God's grace.
And when he finally meets Esau again, the reunion is surprisingly peaceful. Esau has forgiven Jacob, and they reconcile. It's a beautiful picture of the power of forgiveness and the possibility of healing even in the most fractured relationships.
It's a reminder that no matter how broken our relationships may be, God can bring about reconciliation and restoration. It gives us hope that even the deepest wounds can be healed.
It does. And it's through Jacob, now Israel, that the nation of Israel will be formed, fulfilling God's promise to Abraham to make his descendants into a great nation.
His story is a powerful testament to God's faithfulness and his ability to work through even the most flawed and broken individuals to accomplish his purposes. It's a story that gives us hope, reminding us that God can use even our mistakes and failures to shape us into the people he has called us to be.
And as we delve into the stories of Jacob's 12 sons, we see that this pattern of God working through imperfect people continues. Each son, with his own unique personality and flaws, will face challenges and conflicts. But through it all, God is shaping them, preparing them for the roles they will play in the unfolding story of Israel.
Jacob's story also highlights the importance of family, both the blessings and the challenges, his relationships with his wives. Leah and Rachel are complex, marked by jealousy and rivalry, and his sons, well, they're a diverse bunch, each with their own strengths and weaknesses.
It's a family drama that's both relatable and fascinating. It reminds us that even the most faithful people, those who are called by God, still struggle with very human emotions and challenges.
Absolutely. And one of those sons, Joseph, will play a pivotal role in the story of facing trials and triumphs that will have far-reaching consequences for his family and the entire nation. His story is one of the most beloved and dramatic in all of Genesis. This is a story about betrayal, forgiveness, and ultimately God's providence working through adversity to bring about a greater good.
It's a story that speaks to the resilience of the human spirit, the power of faith in the face of hardship, and the unwavering love of God, who is always working for our good, even when we can't see it.
Okay, let's dive into Joseph's epic tale. Genesis tells us that Joseph, the 11th son of Jacob and Rachel's firstborn, was dearly loved by his father.
And as we've seen before, this favoritism, especially when it comes to those birthright blessings, can cause tension within a family. Jacob even gave Joseph a special coat of many colors, a symbol of his love and preference.
I can imagine how that went over with his brothers.
It didn't go over well at all. It fueled their resentment, and that resentment boiled over when Joseph shared a series of dreams with them in these dreams. It seemed like he was destined for greatness, even ruling over his brothers.
It's like he unintentionally poured gasoline on the fire of their jealousy, and these weren't just random dreams. They were prophetic glimpses into God's plan for Joseph's life.
But his brothers didn't see it that way. They saw it as arrogance, a threat to their own position in the family, and in a moment of rage and resentment, they conspire to get rid of him.
It's a heartbreaking betrayal, a story that reminds us just how powerful and destructive jealousy can be. They considered killing him, but ultimately decided to sell him into slavery to a passing caravan of Ishmaelites headed for Egypt.
It's a devastating blow for Jacob, who is told that Joseph has been killed by a wild animal. He mourns deeply for his son, unaware that Joseph is still alive, but facing a very uncertain future in a foreign land.
Meanwhile, in Egypt, Joseph is sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard, despite his circumstances. Joseph remains faithful to God and excels in his duties.
It's amazing to see Joseph's resilience in the face of such adversity. He could have easily given in to despair and bitterness, but instead he chooses to trust God and make the best of a situation.
He's a great example of how we can choose to respond to difficult circumstances. We can either let them crush us, or we can rise above them, trusting that God is with us, even in the darkest of times. And Joseph's faith is rewarded. He gains Potiphar's trust and is given a position of authority in his household.
But his fortunes take a turn for the worse when Potiphar's wife falsely accuses Joseph of trying to seduce her. It's a classic case of injustice, of someone being punished for a crime they didn't commit.
It's heartbreaking to see Joseph, who has already endured so much, now facing this false accusation and the consequences that come with it.
As a result of this false accusation, Joseph is thrown into prison. It seems like his life is spiraling downward and all hope is lost. But even in prison, Joseph's character shines through.
I love that even in this place of darkness and despair, he continues to trust God. He doesn't allow his circumstances to define him, but instead he chooses to live with integrity and purpose.
His wisdom and integrity are recognized by the prison warden, and he's given a position of authority within the prison. It's amazing to see how God can use even the most difficult situations to prepare us for greater things.
It's a reminder that our current circumstances, no matter how challenging, are not necessarily our final destination. God may be using these trials to shape us, to refine our character, and to prepare us for a future that we can't even imagine.
And in prison, Joseph encounters two of Pharaoh's officials, the cupbearer and the baker, who have fallen out of favor with the king. Both men have had troubling dreams, and Joseph, with God's help, is able to interpret those dreams, revealing their futures.
It's a moment that highlights Joseph's unique gifting, his ability to understand the language of dreams.
And this gift will play a crucial role in his own destiny. The cupbearer is restored to his position, but tragically the baker is executed up. Joseph asks the cupbearer to remember him when he's back in Pharaoh's good graces, hoping for a chance to be released from prison.
But the cupbearer, caught up in his own good fortune, forgets about Joseph, leaving him languishing in prison for 2 more years. It's a painful reminder that even when we do what's right, life can be unfair, and we may face disappointments and delays. But even in this setback, God is working behind the scenes, preparing Joseph for an even greater purpose.
And that purpose is revealed when Pharaoh himself has a series of disturbing dreams that none of his wise men can interpret. It's a moment of crisis for the king, a moment when he's desperate for answers.
And finally, the cupbearer remembers Joseph. It only took him 2 years and a royal crisis, but better late than never, right? He tells Pharaoh about Joseph's ability to interpret dreams, and Joseph is summoned from prison.
It's a dramatic moment filled with anticipation. Joseph, standing before Pharaoh, humbly acknowledges that it is God, not himself, who holds the power to interpret dreams. He then proceeds to explain Pharaoh's dreams, revealing that they foretell 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of severe famine in Egypt.
Talk about a high-pressure situation. But Joseph, relying on God's wisdom, delivers the message with clarity and conviction.
And Pharaoh, impressed by Joseph's abilities, appoints him as second in command over all of Egypt, entrusting him with the responsibility of preparing for the coming famine. It's an extraordinary turn of events.
Yeah.
Joseph, the slave, the prisoner, is now one of the most powerful men in Egypt.
It's an incredible testament to God's faithfulness and his ability to elevate those who are humble and trust in him. And Joseph, guided by God's wisdom, implements a plan to store grain during the years of plenty, ensuring that Egypt will have enough food to survive the coming famine.
His foresight and leadership saved countless lives, not only in Egypt, but also in surrounding lands, including Canaan, where his own family is struggling to survive. And that sets the stage for a dramatic reunion between Joseph and his brothers who come to Egypt to buy grain during the famine.
It's a reunion that's been years in the making, a moment filled with both joy and trepidation. They don't recognize Joseph, who has grown into a powerful and mature leader, but he recognizes them.
And instead of immediately revealing his identity, Joseph tests his brothers, putting them through a series of trials to see if they have changed their ways, if they truly regret their past actions. It's a tense and emotional journey as Joseph grapples with his own feelings of hurt and betrayal.
It's a powerful story about forgiveness, about confronting the past, and about finding healing and reconciliation. Eventually, Joseph reveals himself to his brothers, and the reunion is filled with tears, forgiveness, and a sense of God's incredible providence.
Joseph assures his brothers that he doesn't hold their past actions against them, recognizing that God used their evil intentions for good, ultimately bringing him to Egypt to save many lives, including their own.
It's a powerful message of redemption, showing how God can work through even the most painful experiences to bring about a greater good. Joseph then invites his father and his entire family to come to Egypt, where they could be provided for during the remaining years of famine.
And so Jacob and his sons, along with their families and flocks, journey to Egypt, where they settle in the land of Goshen.
It's a significant moment in the story of God's chosen people, the beginning of a long sojourn in a foreign land. It's a time of both blessing and hardship, but God remains with them, continuing to guide and protect them, preparing them for the day when they will return to the Promised Land.
And it's in Egypt that the Israelites will multiply and grow into a great nation, fulfilling God's covenant with Abraham. Joseph's story is a beautiful testament to the power of forgiveness, the importance of trusting in God's plan, and the incredible ways in which God can work through adversity to bring about his purposes.
It's a story that continues to inspire and challenge us. Today, we see God's hand at work in Joseph's life, guiding him through trials and triumphs, using him to save lives and to fulfill his promises. And as we move into the final chapters of Genesis, we'll see how this incredible story of faith and redemption continues to unfold. We've seen God's incredible faithfulness through the lives of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, as we enter the final chapters of Genesis, we find Jacob nearing the end of his life, and he gathers his sons together to bestow blessings upon them.
These aren't just casual well wishes. These blessings are prophetic pronouncements that offer a glimpse into the future of each of the 12 tribes of Israel. They're filled with symbolism and imagery that reveal the unique strengths and weaknesses of each son.
Right.
And they foreshadow the role each tribe will play in the grand narrative of God's chosen people.
It's like Jacob is painting a portrait of Israel's destiny, a tapestry woven with the diverse threads of his sons' characters and destinies.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
And it's amazing to think about how these pronouncements, spoken so long ago, shaped the course of history.
Exactly. Take Reuben, for example, as the firstborn. He had the natural claim to leadership. But Jacob acknowledges Reuben's strength and potential while also alluding to his past failings, describing him as unstable as water.
Right.
It's a poignant reminder that even those with great potential can stumble.
And that our past choices can have a lasting impact on our lives.
Yeah.
But it's also encouraging to hear Jacob acknowledge that even in Reuben's blessing, there's hope, Aitor. He says Reuben will excel in dignity and excel in power.
Yes, it shows that God's grace can redeem even our mistakes.
That's a powerful message for all of us, isn't it?
It is.
No matter what we've done in the past, God's grace is always available to us. He can take our failures and use them to shape us into the people he has called us to be.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder to never give up hope, to always believe in the possibility of redemption and transformation. And then there are Simeon and Levi. Their blessing takes on a much more somber tone.
Yeah, Jacob rebukes them for their violence and cruelty, recalling their vengeful attack on the men of Shechem after their sister Dinah was violated. It's a stark reminder that anger and revenge can lead to devastating consequences.
It highlights the importance of seeking justice through righteous means rather than taking matters into our own hands.
Exactly. It's a lesson that's as relevant today as it was back then.
Yeah.
We live in a world where violence and revenge are often glorified, but God calls us to a higher standard.
Right.
He calls us to seek justice, to be peacemakers, to break the cycle of violence.
It's a challenge, but it's one worth striving for. And then we come to Judah, the fourth son.
Yes.
His blessing stands out from the rest of them. Jacob declares that Judah will be a leader among his brothers, that the scepter will not depart from Judah, foreshadowing the royal lineage that will culminate in King David.
Yes.
And ultimately in Jesus the Messiah.
It's an incredible moment, a prophetic declaration that points forward to the coming of the Savior. It's through Judah's line that the ultimate blessing, the promise of redemption, will be fulfilled.
It's amazing to see how these blessings spoken thousands of years ago are still shaping our understanding of God's plan for humanity, and each of the other sons receives blessings that highlight their individual characters.
That's right.
And the future of their tribes.
Issachar, known for his strength and endurance, is compared to a strong donkey. Zebulun, associated with trade and commerce, is linked to the sea. Dan, known for his cunning, is compared to a serpent. Each blessing is rich with symbolism and meaning.
And finally, we come to Joseph, Jacob's most beloved son. His blessing is overflowing with affirmation and praise.
It is.
Jacob acknowledges Joseph's resilience, his wisdom, and his unwavering faith in God. He describes Joseph as a fruitful vine, a symbol of his prosperity and ability to overcome obstacles.
It's a beautiful image of growth and flourishing even in the face of adversity, and Jacob acknowledges the hardships that Joseph endured, referring to the archers who bitterly grieved him.
Right.
But he also affirms Joseph's strength and resilience.
He says his bow remained steady, and his strong arms were strengthened by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob.
It's powerful.
It's a powerful reminder that even when we go through trials and betrayals, God is with us, sustaining us, and giving us the strength to persevere. And Joseph's blessing doesn't stop there. It points forward to the blessings that will flow through his descendants, a legacy of faith and obedience that will impact generations to come.
A beautiful reminder that our choices, our faithfulness can have a ripple effect that extends far beyond our own lifetimes.
It is. And as we come to the very end of Genesis, we see Jacob giving his final instructions to his sons, requesting that they bury him in the cave of Machpelah.
It's a powerful moment that connects Jacob back to his ancestors, to the legacy of faith that he is passing on to his children.
And after Jacob's death, Joseph fulfills his father's request, ensuring that he is buried in the promised land. It's a testament to Joseph's loyalty and his deep respect for his father.
Joseph also reassures his brothers who are fearful of retribution for their past actions. It's a final act of forgiveness and grace, a testament to the transformative power of God's love.
And with that, the book of Genesis comes to a close. We've journeyed from creation to covenant, witnessed the struggles and triumphs of humanity's earliest ancestors, and seen God's faithfulness woven through the generations.
It's a story that continues to resonate with us today, offering wisdom and insight for our own journeys of faith. We've seen how God works through imperfect people, how he redeems our failures, and how he remains faithful to his promises.
Genesis reminds us that we're part of a larger story, a story of love, redemption, and hope. And as we close the book on Genesis, we can do so with confidence, knowing that the same God who was faithful to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is faithful to us as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Genesis. We hope you found it enriching and encouraging.